whilst everybody's been wondering what the hell is going on at West Ham at the moment, there's been something which I think is certainly assumed. And that is assumed by me. I'd absolutely level this at myself. But I notice it in others as well. And that is that David Moyes is stubborn and is beyond compromise. But sometimes somebody says something that sort of makes you think and makes you sort of analyse your own way of thinking. And it was Gio yesterday in his video. And it was really when he gave the example of Stuart Pearce not being allowed to join Moyes during his second stint at West Ham. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about this, as you'll see in the headline, is there's a report that David Moyes attended an Arsenal friendly against Monaco alongside Tim Steidten. So the story is these two who seemingly don't get on attended a game together to assess one of Tim Steidten's targets. That in itself separates and is separate to the narrative that we hear that the two don't get on, that David Moyes completely rejects anything that Tim Steidten says. That would indicate compromise. And as I say, it's really not... It's not the story that's been peddled at the moment. That's a contradiction to the story we hear. So I thought to myself, can David Moyes compromise? Would he actually do this? And I think, do you know what? Maybe, just maybe, he's not as stubborn as a lot of us think, and I would include myself in that, and as stubborn as the narrative needs you to believe him to be. That makes sense. So a lot of, I've said for quite some time, there's a lot of anti-Moyes. There almost seems to be like an anti-Moyes agenda to get him out. And I'll just reiterate it because I have to. If I don't say this, I hate disclaimers, but if I don't, someone's going to say it in the comments. I just want to reiterate, I would have got rid of Moyes last season, right? I think long term, he's not the guy to bring forward this wonderful crop of young talent at the club, right? But I think there's a number of reasons why you could have got rid of him or should have got rid of him without inventing ones. And I think there's been a lot of invented stuff. And I also think there's a lot of stuff conversationally which we can never know. I just don't believe... Look, Sullivan leaks stuff, and those are the parts we get. But Sullivan hasn't leaked anything about Tim Steidten being frustrated. He just hasn't, because, to be fair, that would only make Sullivan look bad. David Moyes hasn't leaked anything particularly about Tim Steidten either. So we're to believe that either Tim Steidten's leaked it or that Mark Noble is basically briefing people on what goes on in those meetings. I don't believe that either. I just don't believe that Noble's like that. It's just implausible. So do I believe that it's completely harmonious? Probably not. But the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But I also do believe that David Moyes has had a veto on certain targets. But what we're hearing now is if they travel to the game together, then David Moyes has to have compromised somewhat. I just want to go back to what Gio said. So when David Moyes came in for his second stint, David Sullivan offered him the job and David Moyes said yes. And David Moyes said, these are my coaches, Alan Irvine and Paul Nevin and Stuart Pearce. And David Sullivan said, no, you're not having Stuart Pearce. If David Moyes was honestly completely stubborn, he would have turned around and said, right, that's it, I'm not taking the job yet. The fact that when Sullivan said you're not having Stuart Pearce, he had to compromise. He had to say, okay, well, you're the boss. Okay, I'll take the bits that I can have. And I think there's probably other times when he's compromised. I am absolutely convinced that he has played players in his team that he didn't choose. I think Ben Rama's one of them. I think Souček's another one, funnily enough. Well, we know this anyway because it wasn't David Moyes that scouted him. He actually, at that point, he was desperate for a midfielder and he did rely upon the club scouting network. And as we know, Jordan Miles at that point to say, well, hold on, I've scouted someone. He's over in the Czech Republic. His name's Thomas Souček and so on and so forth. And David Moyes said, okay, let's get him in. So that was the compromise. David Moyes wanted to get in Jared Bowen, and he also needed a midfield replacement or somebody to fill that gap, and he brought in Souček. So there is some compromise there, and he can do it. And I just wonder if that's what's going on with Tim Steidten. Now, there's a lot of contradiction in this video because I'm not completely sure that David Moyes attended this game with Tim Steidten, and I'll tell you why I don't believe it. Because of smartphones. Whoever has leaked the story that David Moyes attended the game and sat alongside Tim Steidten understands the dynamic. Whoever leaked the news has seen him. Oh my goodness, look up there. It's David Moyes and there's Tim Steidten. you all know this day and age. Everyone's got a smartphone. Everyone's got a camera. Never mind one camera on your phone. I bet if you're watching this now, the phone you're watching it on, unless you've got a very old phone, has 3 or 4 lenses on it. Some of them, right? Some of these things have got 5 or 6 lenses on them. You've got one for close-up, you've got one for mid-distance, one to face you, one to face away, well, probably 3 or 4 to face away from you, and you've got one zoom one, which automatically... There is no reason, if that happens, that a little buzz would have gone around, all that's David Moyes and Tim Steidten, snap. Now, I've not seen anything yet, and I do apologise, right, if at the point of recording this video, if a load of those pictures have popped up on social media, I'm happy to be stand corrected, and I mean genuinely happy. In fact, I'll go before I publish this, I'll go and check it. If there is one, I'll go and put it on the thumbnail of this video. And I do want to be corrected. I do want it to be true because I actually would quite like them to attend a game together. But this would be really good news, it has to be said. But it does make me wonder if David Moyes has been browbeaten to the point where he's almost forced to accept Tim Steidten's offerings. And I wonder, was this the plan all along? And I know I've said it before, and I know I'm not the first person to say it. But a situation where the club say, OK, David, we'll give you, we're going to go and make an approach for Polinia. We're going to go and make an approach for Harry Maguire, make an approach for McTominay, and whoever else you think that might have been David Moyes' picks. We often get... there's often comments on here which turns around and say, Sullivan will say he tried. Sullivan will say he tried. I don't think he does it an awful lot because I don't think he cares. For you to believe that Sullivan wants to let the fans know that he tried, you have to believe that Sullivan cares what the fans think. I don't think he does. I've seen too many interactions with fan sites. I've seen believe you me, I've seen the interaction between David Sullivan and Hammers United when Hammers United were asking for more away tickets for fans. And, you know, I'm telling you now, this does not smack of somebody that is overly concerned by what you think. Gio touched on it yesterday. I think he's very concerned what the wider media think. For some reason, it's a weird thing, isn't it? So David Sullivan I think he's almost very concerned what a Man United fan that's listening to Talk Sport might think of West Ham. Or a Liverpool fan that's picking up a newspaper, what he might think of West Ham. You get the idea. A non-West Ham fan watching Sky Sports News, he wants them to think West Ham are a brilliantly run club. They're absolutely fantastic. So I don't think it's a case of him saying, we tried. Not to the fans anyway. But I do believe he might have said it to David Moyes. And I would not be surprised if that's what this is about. And when I say this is a case of, Moyesy, we tried. We tried to get Polinia. Moyesy, we tried to get McTominay. We tried to get Harry Maguire. We couldn't get him. Now, can we go and just go and check out Tim's? Let's go and check out Tim's picks, shall we? See what he's got in his dossier. See what he's got in his little black book. And that would be it'd be a really weird, complicated and convoluted way of doing it. That's a long arse way. That's not going from A to B. That's trying to get from A to B and going via Z. It's ridiculous. But I never, for a moment, suggested there was clarity of thinking or a purpose of direction in anybody at West Ham. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it is. I think we're the very essence of a muddled thinking club. So I wouldn't put it past him at all. I guess none of that matters, apart from the fact that it's put us lot through the ringer, and we've had quite a fraught experience in the transfer window, and we're all worried what the hell is going on with West Ham. And so we've been put through it. I guess if the net result is that David Moyes forges a closer relationship with the director of football, and I guess ultimately that's no bad thing. I don't know. I'm undecided. Whether or not all of this was actually something to try and force David Moyes out. That would be equally convoluted, as I described in yesterday's video. It's easier just to sack him. It really is. I think there's utter confusion at West Ham, and I'm pleased to see more of the attention focusing on David Sullivan actually now, because I think it's his tune that's leading the dance, and I don't think he knows what tune he's playing at the moment. I really don't. And I think David Moyes deserves better, quite frankly, than being thrown under the bus. You know, the moment David Moyes is retained, David Moyes has every right to expect that West Ham will go after his targets wholeheartedly. The moment we retain him as manager, David Moyes absolutely must expect, in good faith, that when he hands over his list of players, the McTominay and Maguire and whatnot, that David Sullivan's going to go and get them. It's not really fair on him that we don't really have a proper go. Well, what is, just think, release him, let him go. Let him go. Say to him, just be honest. Say, Moyes, these are ageing players. These are journeyman footballers. I'm not going to invest Declan Rice's 105 million in these players. I'm not going to do it. Rather than sort of stringing him along saying, oh yeah, well we're trying, we're still in negotiations with Southampton, oh man, you don't want to deal with us, and going all of this way. Anyway, so apparently they went and watched Fofana, last night before last, something like that. It'd be great. It'd be absolutely great if they did. And I don't know, I haven't seen it. The only thing I've done this morning is I've checked around the internet. I watched Stell's video on West Ham Voice. He said, by all accounts, that Fofana had played well in that game. I've got, to be fair, my life's a little bit too busy to sit down in the evening and watch Monaco against Arsenal. So, and I don't think I could bear to watch Arsenal play. So I'm going to rely on other people like Stell for that one to, if the information is that Fofana played well, then I'll absolutely believe that, and I'll take that information. That'd be really good. And maybe that's what David Moyes needs. Maybe David Moyes needs to be taken, held by his hand, taken to a game and said, look, this is the player. And he sees him. Look, I don't mind. I've seen Fofana just on YouTube clips and stuff like that. It looks like an absolute beast. He really does. I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, well, you know what, if this is what the club want when they're going after Zakaria, then Fofana looks like... it's tough to say with Zakaria. Zakaria doesn't strike me as a defensive midfielder, but even Fofana looks a little bit more box to box. It has to be said. Anyway, look, we'll deal with that later. We'll do a transfer roundup later or something like that. We'll cover this stuff over the next couple of days on both Hammers channels. That's for sure. But I think what I was going to say with Fofana, maybe he's just sort of a younger, even if he's not precisely the same player. Maybe he's just a younger, less injury prone version of Zakaria. They're both units. They're both people you would hope would be able to adapt to the Premier League. And realistically, that's what counts, right? For David Moyes, you'd imagine. Surely that's important to him, because this whole thing about wanting British or wanting players that are acclimatised to the Premier League, I understand why he wants them, but I think he's a little bit confused, because actually the players that were purchased from the Premier League, I felt, or from the UK, didn't particularly hit the ground running last season. I don't think that was the case. I've already said it before. I don't think Emerson was great from the start. I don't think Cornet hit the ground running. I don't think Flynn Downs, I don't think particularly it's Flynn Downs' fault, but no, did he? No, he didn't. And I think, whereas actually, maybe early on, I think Skamaka was all right at the start. I think it was later he petered off, So I know eventually, I think he's almost basing it on the fact that Paqueta came good at the end. But, I think if you look at it overall with the 8-9 signings or whatever it was that we signed, even Danny Ings didn't sort of come in and hit the ground running. Again, there's mitigation. He doesn't suit David Moyes' system. But I think Agurd was an injury. So I think it's more important that they're suited to the Premier League rather than they just come from the Premier League. The Premier League is full of teams who sign players from overseas and they do really, really well. Too numerous to list. Honestly, it'd be an hour-long video, me listing all the players that came in last season to Premier League teams that weren't bought from UK-based sides and actually thrived and did really, really well. They're numerous. Anyway, there you go. So David Moyes attended a game with Tim Steidten. They're now best buddies. Don't know whether it's true. Got to say that. Don't know whether it's true. What is nice and what I do like is there's a little bit more positive news. So it's, I guess, good to do a more positive story. I guess we'll find out. We're not in a position where we can wait any longer. The proof of the pudding's in the tasting. We can't be running, stories for the next 2 weeks saying, oh, I hear David Moyes and Tim Steidten are getting on. No, this has to have a net result. This new partnership, if you want, if it's to be believed, has to manifest itself in signings instantly, really, really quickly. And I think that's incredibly important. Otherwise, if I'm still sat here talking about this in 4 or 5 days' time, then, it's not worked. What I expect to happen is they go and watch Fofana. David Moyes says, yeah, do you know what, Tim? Actually, you're right. You know what? We can't get McTominay. We can't get anyone else. I think this guy can do a job. Let's go and bid for him. And the bid goes in already. Never mind this video. Not today. Yesterday. The bid went in yesterday. If that happens, then we will understand that the system's finally starting to work.